Nathan Hale had built his life on rules, clear, unshakable rules. Every morning was the same. Wake before dawn, review market reports over a black coffee, arrive at the office before the first employee stepped through the door. It was the kind of discipline that had made him the youngest CEO in the city's history. The kind that kept chaos at bay, or so he believed. That morning began just as predictably, until it didn't. A low fog rolled through the streets, swallowing buildings. In pale shadows, Nathan's driver waited at the curb, engine humming. But instead of stepping inside, Nathan told him he'd walked the last few blocks. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe the strange pull of the mist, but his polished shoes carried him down a narrower street than usual, the kind with uneven cobblestones and the faint smell of rain-soaked brick. Halfway down, something caught his eye. At first, it looked like a bundle of old blankets tossed carelessly against a wall. But then the bundle moved. A small head lifted, messy hair, wide eyes, and a face far too young to carry the weight it held. The girl couldn't have been older than 7. Beside her was another child, identical in every detail, same tangled hair, same wary gaze, and in the arms of one twin was a baby, swaddled in a tattered scarf. His cheeks flushed with cold. Nathan froze. The noise of the city faded until all he could hear was the faint, uneven whimper of the infant. The girls stared at him as if he were an intruder in their world, one they didn't trust. Their small hands gripped the baby protectively, their posture telling him they'd been defending him for far too long. He took a step closer, raising his hands slightly as if approaching a frightened bird. "It's all right," he said quietly, his voice gentler than he remembered it could be. "Are you hurt?" The girl holding the baby didn't answer. The other spoke, her tone flat, as if reciting something she'd said too many times before. "We don't have anywhere to go." Her words landed heavy in the damp air. Nathan's mind scrambled for a practical response. Call a shelter, alert the authorities, but practicality felt paper thin against the sight in front of him. Their shoes were worn through, their knees scraped, the baby's breathing shallow. Every instinct told him to turn this into someone else's problem. Every instinct, except one. The one that made him take off his coat, drape it over the shivering children, and say, "Come with me." The twins hesitated, glancing at each other in a silent conversation only they understood. Then, slowly they stood. Nathan gathered the baby into his arms, feeling the small, fragile weight settle against his chest. He told himself it was temporary, a ride to somewhere warm, a stopgap until the system could take over. But deep down, something in him already knew this wasn't the kind of situation you could walk away from. By the time he reached the lobby of his glass-walled tower, the baby had stopped crying, lulled by the steady beat of Nathan's heart. The twins stayed close, their tiny footsteps echoing in the marble hall. And though Nathan didn't yet realize it, he was stepping into the one negotiation of his life that would change him forever. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing out the noise of the world, and for the first time Nathan could hear the sound of his own breathing. He looked down at the baby in his arms, tiny fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt, his small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Beside him, the twins stood stiff and quiet, their reflections caught in the mirrored walls like faint ghosts. Nathan had faced hostile takeovers, billion-dollar negotiations, and the collapse of entire markets without a tremor in his voice. Yet now, with 2 silent children and an infant staring up at him, he felt a pressure unlike anything in his career. It wasn't about money or contracts. It was about responsibility, the kind you couldn't sign away. When the doors opened, his penthouse greeted them with its usual pristine stillness, floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a skyline shrouded in fog, polished marble floors gleaming under soft light, and furniture arranged with geometric perfection. It was a place built for business meetings and solitary evenings, not for bare feet and restless energy. The twins hesitated on the threshold, clutching each other's hands. Nathan knelt to meet their eye level. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low and steady. "No one will hurt you." They stepped inside cautiously, scanning the unfamiliar space as if expecting the walls to vanish. The baby stirred, his small face scrunching in discomfort. Nathan realized he didn't even know when the child had last eaten. He set his jacket aside, pulled out his phone, and called his house manager, instructing her to bring warm clothes, food, and anything suitable for children. While waiting, Nathan led the twins to the kitchen. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The taller one by perhaps half an inch spoke first. "I'm Emma." She glanced at her sister. "This is Ava. And your brother?" Nathan asked, adjusting the baby's blanket. "Liam," Emma said, her voice trembling only slightly. "He's hungry." Nathan opened the refrigerator, realizing it was stocked for a businessman's life: bottled water, imported cheese, and neatly packed pre-prepared meals. Not one thing a baby could eat. His chest tightened with frustration, not at the children, but at himself for not knowing the simplest solution to such a basic need. Moments later, his house manager arrived, carrying grocery bags and a large box. She didn't ask questions, only got to work preparing warm milk and a simple meal. Nathan watched as Ava's shoulders slowly loosened with each spoonful of food, and Emma began whispering to her, the baby finally quiet against his chest after his first proper feeding in hours. Nathan should have been relieved, but instead, he felt a strange, growing awareness these children had trusted him, a stranger enough to follow him here. He couldn't just send them away like an inconvenient. Meeting rescheduled for another day. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from his assistant. "The board is waiting. Are you on your way?" Nathan stared at the words. The meeting was important, career-defining, but so were the 3 lives sitting at his kitchen counter. And in that moment, he realized he was no longer deciding between business and charity. He was deciding what kind of man he wanted to be. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and sat with the children, letting the minutes pass. Somewhere far below, the city moved on without him, and for the first time in years, Nathan didn't care. Nathan thought the hardest part would be getting the children warm, fed, and calm. He was wrong. By the next morning, his penthouse had transformed. A corner of the living room was now a makeshift play area with blankets on the floor, a few stuffed toys, and a pile of coloring books the house manager had picked up late the previous night. The air smelled faintly of oatmeal instead of his usual imported coffee. Yet, for all the changes around him, the most startling shift was inside him. He had spent years perfecting the art of detachment, never letting personal emotions disrupt the smooth machinery of his work. But now, he caught himself checking if Liam's blanket was tucked in tightly enough, or if Emma and Ava had eaten enough breakfast. Just as the children began to show small signs of comfort, Emma daring to smile, Ava leaning against him when she was tired, the knock came. Firm, repeated. The kind of knock that carried official weight. Nathan opened the door to find 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a navy blazer, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Hale," she began, her tone clipped but polite. "We received a report about 3 minors in your custody. We need to ask you some questions." His jaw tightened. "They're safe here. They were alone in an alley yesterday. I wasn't going to leave them there." The woman adjusted her glasses. "We appreciate your concern, but without formal guardianship, they can't remain with you. We'll need to place them in temporary care while we begin the proper process." Nathan looked over his shoulder. Emma and Ava were huddled together in the living room doorway, their eyes wide with the kind of fear that was born from being moved too many times. Liam stirred in Ava's arms, sensing the tension. He turned back to the officials. "Temporary care? You mean separate homes? I was told last night there wasn't even a place that could take all 3 together." The woman hesitated before replying, which was answer enough. Nathan's voice dropped, calm but unyielding. "I'm not letting them be split up. If there's paperwork, I'll sign it. If there's a process, I'll start it today. But they're staying here until you find a place that keeps them together." The silence stretched. Finally, the woman said, "You'll need to speak with family services directly. But that's not a guarantee." Nathan closed the door slowly. After they left, the sound of the latch clicking far too loud in the quiet room. He knelt in front of the twins. "I'm not going to let anyone take you somewhere you don't want to go. That's a promise." Promises were dangerous. He knew that. But watching Ava cling tighter to Liam and Emma meet his gaze with a flicker of hope, Nathan realized this was one he would keep no matter how much it cost him. He had no idea that the fight to protect them was only just beginning. and the forces working against them were far more powerful than he imagined. Nathan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the twins' faces, Emma trying to stay brave, Ava holding Liam as if letting go would make him disappear. The fog outside had lifted by morning, but inside, his thoughts felt heavier than ever. By sunrise, he had already made calls, lawyers, contacts in City Hall, old acquaintances who owed him favors. It didn't matter that his day was supposed to be filled with meetings worth millions. None of it felt as urgent as the 3 small lives now sharing his home. He stood in the kitchen, watching as Emma tried to teach Ava how to make toast using the shiny stainless steel toaster. They were whispering, but the quiet giggles that followed made him realize something. This was probably the first moment of normal they'd had in a long time. The moment shattered when his phone lit up with a name he couldn't ignore: Evelyn Marks, head of the city's Family Services Department. "Mr. Hale," she began without preamble, "we've reviewed the situation. While your intentions may be good, the children can't legally remain in your care without temporary custody. Approval. That's not something we can grant overnight." Nathan's hand tightened on the counter. "Then let's make it happen today. I'll sign whatever you need. Pay for the process. Hire independent evaluators. It's not about money." Evelyn interrupted. "It's about rules. There's already an open case file. The system will decide what's best for them." His gaze shifted toward the living room, where Ava was holding Liam, humming softly to keep him calm. Emma noticed him watching and gave a small, uncertain wave. "They've been through enough," Nathan said, his voice low but firm. "Separating them will break them." "I'm not letting that happen," Evelyn sighed, the kind of sound that came from years of watching good intentions get crushed by red tape. "Then you'd better prepare for a fight, Mr. Hale, and it won't be a quiet one." The call ended, but her warning lingered. Nathan knew what that meant: media attention, scrutiny of his personal life, and enemies in business circles who would use any scandal to their advantage. That afternoon, the first blow landed. His board of directors called an emergency meeting. Rumors had already started. The CEO is harboring street kids in his penthouse. Whispers about questionable judgment and risk to the company's reputation filled the room. Nathan listened, silent at first, while they talked about brand image and shareholder confidence. When they finally paused, he said evenly, "If protecting 3 children damages our reputation, maybe our reputation isn't worth having." The room went quiet, not because they agreed but because they knew he wouldn't bend. When he returned home that evening, the apartment was filled with the soft, uneven sound of Liam's breathing as he slept. Emma curled beside him on the couch, Ava watching cartoons with the volume low. Nathan stood there for a long time, realizing that his life was no longer about quarterly earnings or market forecasts. It was about keeping a promise. What he didn't know yet was how far the fight would push him or how many lines he'd have to cross to keep them safe. Rain hammered the city in uneven sheets the next morning, drumming against the glass walls of Nathan's penthouse. The gray light made the skyline look almost brittle, as if one strong gust could break it in two. He stood with his hands in his pockets, staring out at the storm, knowing it mirrored the one closing in on him. The fight for Emma, Ava, and Liam was no longer quiet. News outlets had caught wind of the story: Millionaire CEO shelters homeless children in luxury penthouse, and spun it into whatever narrative sold the most clicks. Some painted him as a hero. Others accused him of attention-seeking and questioned his motives. Nathan ignored the noise, but the children couldn't. Emma had overheard a news segment calling them street orphans. She didn't understand the politics behind it, but she understood the sting. That night, she had quietly asked, "Are they going to take us away because people don't want us here?" He had promised her again that he wouldn't let that happen, and this time, he meant it more than ever. By mid-morning, his legal team filled the dining table. Papers spread out like a battlefield map. "We can petition for emergency custody," his lead attorney explained, "but the department will challenge it. They'll say you're unqualified, no parenting history, no training." "I didn't have a history in business before I built this company either," Nathan said. "Find a way." The doorbell rang. It wasn't the police this time. It was Evelyn Marks herself. Her presence was deliberate, her navy coat still glistening with rain. She stepped inside, scanning the home like an inspector. "Mr. Hale, I need to speak with the children privately." Emma instinctively moved closer to him. Ava clutched Liam tighter. Nathan's voice was calm but unyielding. "If you want to know about them, you can ask me. I've been here every hour since I found them. Can you say the same about anyone else on your team?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "You can't shield them from the system forever. If you really care about them, you'll cooperate instead of dragging this out." He met her gaze. "If I really care, that's exactly why I'm dragging this out." Later that evening, Nathan did something he rarely did. He called a press conference, not to talk about quarterly growth or market strategy, but to tell the story of what he had seen in that alley, and why he wouldn't hand the children over to a system that would tear them apart. "They're not a statistic," he said into the microphone, his voice steady but edged with emotion. "They're not a case file. They are 3 lives bound together by more love than I've seen in most boardrooms. And I will not be the man who breaks that bond because it's easier." The flash of cameras lit his face, but he didn't care. Somewhere in the front row, Emma, Ava, and Liam watched him, their small figures almost lost in the crowd. Yet he could feel their eyes on him, trusting him completely. That night, when the penthouse was finally quiet again, Nathan sat by the window with Liam asleep in his arms. The city lights shimmered against the rain-streaked glass, and he knew the storm was far from over. But the promise he'd made to keep them together was no longer just a vow. It had become the center of his life. The day of the court hearing arrived under a pale winter sun, the kind that gave light but no warmth. Nathan stood outside the courthouse with the children beside him, their small hands tucked into his. Emma wore a coat several sizes too big. Ava's scarf trailed almost to the ground, and Liam was bundled tightly against Nathan's chest. From the outside, they looked like an unlikely group, but to him, they were already a family. Reporters clustered near the steps, their questions flying like darts. "Why risk your career for 3 strangers? What makes you think you can raise children?" Nathan ignored them all, focusing only on guiding the children through the doors. Inside, the sterile air smelled faintly of paper and coffee, and the low murmur of voices echoed off marble walls. The hearing room was small but tense. Across the hall sat a representative from Family Services, armed with files, reports, and procedural arguments. Evelyn Marks was there, her face unreadable, though her eyes softened for just a moment when they fell on the children. The judge entered, a man whose sharp gaze scanned the room with quiet authority. The case was called, and Nathan's attorney began. "Your Honor, we are here today not to question the system's value, but to question whether the system can serve these 3 children in the way they deserve together, in a safe and stable environment." Family Services argued that while Nathan's intentions might be genuine, he lacked the traditional qualifications, parenting history, training, and a home environment designed for children. They spoke in measured tones, but their words painted him as a well-meaning outsider overstepping his place. When it was Nathan's turn, he rose slowly, steadying his breath. "Your Honor," he began, "I won't pretend I have all the answers. I've spent my life building companies, not raising children. But when I found them in that alley, they didn't need a perfect parent, they needed someone who wouldn't walk away. I made a promise that day, and I'm standing here because I refused to break it." He looked over at Emma and Ava, who sat clutching each other's hands. "They've lost enough. If you split them apart, you're not just moving them to different addresses, you're taking away the only family they have left. I can give them a home, safety, and a future. But most importantly, I can give them the certainty that tomorrow, the same person will be there when they wake up." The room fell quiet. Even the judge leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. After what felt like hours, he spoke. "This is an unusual request, Mr. Hale, but the law allows for exceptions when it is in the best interest of the children, given the lack of available placements that can keep them together, and your willingness to meet all guardianship requirements. I will grant temporary custody pending further review." Emma gasped softly. Ava's eyes brimmed with tears. She tried to hide. Nathan felt Liam stir against him, as if sensing the shift in the room. The gavel came down, and just like that, the decision was made. Outside the courthouse, The crowd was still there, cameras flashing, voices calling. But Nathan didn't see them. He saw only Emma tugging at his sleeve, whispering, "Does this mean we're staying?" "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're staying." That evening, back in the penthouse, the city lights glowed like 1,000 watchful stars. Emma and Ava laughed as they chased each other round the couch, and Liam, freshly fed, drifted into sleep in Nathan's arms. It struck him then success had always meant numbers, deals, and titles, but now it was measured in small hands holding his, in the sound of laughter echoing through a home that had once been silent, and in the quiet promise of never letting go. Nathan knew there would be challenges ahead, paperwork, adjustments, sleepless nights, but he also knew something else with absolute certainty. He had found the one thing in life he would never, ever try to escape from, because sometimes the most important deals are the ones you make with your own heart.